These are the last pictures of Georgina Edmonds shopping at the Co-op in Colden Common the day before her life was ended in the kitchen of her home. All murder is shocking. The killing of a defenceless 77-year-old woman in her own home is particularly so. Georgina Edmonds' home is set in beautiful countryside, and what happened here has left a scar that will last for years.
It was a shocking murder. What can you tell us about the scene that greeted officers that day?
Yes, well, about 5:30 on Friday the 11th of January 2008, Mrs Edmonds' son Harry returned home from work. He noticed the cottage was in darkness, so he checked on his mother and unfortunately found her lying on the kitchen floor with serious head injuries and stab wounds, and obviously the police were called.
And what can you tell us about the state of the house?
We're not sure whether it was a burglary that went wrong. We certainly know that her handbag and contents were taken, but there was no sign of forced entry, which was quite unusual. So was it somebody that Mrs Edmonds invited in? Was it somebody who let themselves in because the house was insecure and Mrs Edmonds disturbed them? We're just not sure at the moment. We're keeping an open mind as to the motive.
And what clues do you have about who might be responsible?
I've been really encouraged by the support that we've had from the community so far in relation to this investigation. There's still a number of people, though, that we're trying to identify that were seen in and around the area on the day of the murder of Georgina Edmonds. I'm particularly keen to identify a person that's seen at 1 o'clock hanging around by the bridge by the entrance to Fig Tree Cottage, and that's a gentleman aged 30 to 40 years wearing a fluorescent jacket with a hood up. Who is he? If you know who he is, then give us a call. Later on in the afternoon, around about 3 o'clock, there's also a person seen hanging around by the towpath. They appear to be crouching down. Were they going through Mrs Edmonds' handbag, perhaps trying to decide what to take from the contents of that handbag? Really keen to identify that person. And probably most importantly, it's at around about 20 to 11 on the evening, there's a person attempting to use Mrs Edmonds' cash point card at the ATM machine at the Tesco Express in Twyford Road, Eastleigh. You'll see from the footage that this person is wearing a very large fluorescent jacket. Now, is that the same person that was seen at 1 o'clock earlier on in the afternoon, or is it a different person? This person would certainly seem to know the area as they're trying to hide their identity.
And what property have you recovered?
Well, we have the marble rolling pin that was recovered from the scene, which was used to inflict the serious injuries on Mrs Edmonds. But the knife is still outstanding. We're not sure at the moment whether the knife was taken from the scene or whether the offender took the knife with them, but there is a knife outstanding. Now, in addition, obviously Mrs Edmonds' handbag was taken, and that's a black Radley handbag. Has anyone found that property? Has anyone been offered that property during those months since January the 11th, 2008? Really keen to identify that property as it may hold some forensic clues for us. Now, within the handbag are a number of items that are still outstanding. There's Mrs Edmonds' cash point card, there's a very distinctive silver credit card holder, and also her chequebook is still outstanding, which is a Lloyd's chequebook with her name on that. One other thing that's outstanding, which makes this crime even more unusual, is that Mrs Edmonds' house was locked by the offender when they left the scene, and her front door keys are still outstanding. Now, that's a key that's on quite an unusual key fob, which is multicoloured, and we're really keen to identify that piece of property. So if anyone sees that in and around the area, then I'd urge them to contact the police so we can collect that. But one other item that we've actually collected during the investigation is her mobile phone, and that was found some 10 days later along the towpath which leads into Eastleigh Town Centre. And we know from examination that phone was turned on at 3:15 on Friday the 11th of January, which narrows the time down from when Mrs Edmonds was murdered.
This murder happened 18 months ago. How can people remember that day, and how should they go about contacting you now?
I understand it's really difficult for people to remember what happened 18 months ago, but this was the 11th of January, shortly after Christmas. There may still be some people in the area that have come down on an extended Christmas break. It was a miserable day, it was pouring with rain, it was very windy. It would have been unusual, I think, for anyone out and about on that day, walking around, they potentially covered in mud when they got home. They may also have blood on their clothing, and I would urge people to think back to that time. Was there something suspicious about a friend, a neighbour or a relative? And I think this person would have physically changed in their appearance. Certainly the stress of the investigation would be noticeable, I'm sure of it, on that individual. But anyone with any information we can deal with in the strictest confidence, and they can contact us by a number of means.